time, and I call the member for Chifley.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I rise to obviously speak on this bill that was introduced recently by the Minister who's in the House, the Industry Research and Development Amendment, Innovation and Science Australia Bill 2016. It gives us a great opportunity actually to reflect on where we're headed in this space, and from my own particular point of view, with the now addition to, which I've been grateful for, portfolio responsibilities of the digital economy and future of work. These type of things are very big issues for the nation, both now and into the future. Our digital economy, estimated by Deloitte last year, currently standing at about $80 billion, not a small thing, estimated to rise in future years to nearly $140 billion. And the application of digital technology is set to provide a huge economic bonanza, not just in terms of extra businesses and the value of those businesses and the value of their output, but obviously in terms of jobs. Very, very important. But what's been interesting in this space over the last, or in the immediate aftermath of the election, is when you look last year, everyone was talking about innovation. Everyone was talking about how big it was to the country. There was a big focus, particularly in early-stage innovation. Both the member for Griffith and I have taken a deep interest in this for quite some time. We've actually spent time over in Silicon Valley earlier this year, where we visited places like 500 startups that are one of the great models, one of the great examples of how to build startup communities, and in particular new firms that are providing opportunities for jobs. We, for example, can see, even in the Australian context, that between 2003 and 2014, by figures produced by the Department of Industry, 2 million net new jobs created by very young enterprises. A lot of those are startups. But all the focus that we saw on startups has gone. It seems to have literally disappeared from the political landscape in this country. I don't know why. I'd be interested to know why there's been such a retreat. The startup community in Australia was very supportive of the Turnbull government, very vocal in their support of some of the things that have been done, but you hardly hear the new minister, who's here today, talk about them. In fact, he is leading the retreat from any discussion on startups. Agility these days equals speed of retreat. That's what agility means. That's the exciting time to beat a retreat, is right now under this new minister, who brings in these bills that are part of, ostensibly, the National Innovation and Science Agenda. I basically see a lot of this stuff is make work for a minister that is not really interested in championing the cause of startups. The argument now is that we need to broaden it out, that there are new firms that existing SMEs that we need to be focused on how to make them innovate more. On paper, that sounds great. The reality is it's quite different. There is an incapacity within those opposite to argue the case for the startup sector in this country, because they've detected that there is a degree of reticence in the Australian community about the impact of technological change on jobs. There is no denying that is there. It's a reality. But the key for us is to keep focusing on the huge job-creating capacity of startups in this place, in this country, as on the figures that I've quoted before, and to also help manage the change going forward. But there is absolutely no game plan from those opposites. It's why the federal opposition has added specifically a responsibility within our shadow ministry on looking at the future of work to deal with the fact that automation will change the nature of work in this country, as it will in most advanced economies. It will change, right from entry-level jobs to jobs that are being done now by white-collar people and blue-collar people. When you've got 3D printed homes in China, as it's happening right now, when you see entry-level jobs that are completely changed because automation is doing the work that people used to do. Some of the categories, for instance, drivers that are potentially impacted by self-driving vehicles, their jobs will change. Even this afternoon, I was talking with people about how journalists, for instance, can see automation occurring within their field as well. The reality is those jobs are going to be changed. Between 10 to 40% of jobs impacted by automation, we need a game plan on it. Those opposite don't have it. And when they pick up the anxiety of the general public in relation to this issue, what they do is they retreat. They equate that any talk about startups and early stage innovation causes an anxiety that they're unable to deal with. And you can see that inability in the way that they fail to support school funding in this country, in the way that they fail to support the expansion of TAFE in this country, the way that they fail to support the proper expansion of university and tertiary education in this country. And so, when they retreat, we see what we're getting from this Minister for Innovation, who, remarkably, I'm surprised, the comments I'm picking up from the startup community about the blasé nature of this innovation minister towards the startup community. Prominent members of the startup community have told me they've attempted, I'm not going to, what, so you can go on a witch hunt? Prominent members of the startup community telling me that they've tried to meet with you, Minister, through the chair, and being told, no, they can meet with an advisor. Roundtables that are held instead of actually going and meeting with the community itself. So why is it that we are having this? The reason why we're having it is because you have an inability to engage with the sector. And ever since you have come into the job, I don't need to fabricate anything, Minister, because I'm picking it up on the ground, and I know the people who have said to me, said, I cannot believe that a minister is not interested in meeting with us, instead just relegates it to an advisory meeting or advisor-level meeting instead of doing the job properly. I would imagine. No. You know why? Because everyone knows, Minister Hunt, that on that side of politics, if you dare say anything against this government, that you will be on the list and you will cop all sorts of bad treatment. But the reality is people know you are not up to the task, Minister, of being able to champion the startup sector issues. You are not able to champion the issues for the startup community. And so, instead of recognising the reality that in terms of the rate of formation of startups in this country, I've got him going. I've never seen so much animation and energy from him. If only he had delivered it in the short space of time that he's been an innovation minister. In the short space of time. And also overseen, well, the world's greatest minister, exactly, yes. The nation did welcome that with a degree, I believe the term is widespread irony, was the way that it was received. But at any rate, no, you should go out. You should go and tell people. That's how you should introduce yourself, Minister. The world's greatest minister. I'm Greg Hunt. I'm the world's greatest minister. Go and talk to people like that. I actually extend to you the invitation to do it. And so the realisation is this, that it's not in your heart to champion them. You're not out there championing them. You're not recognising the fact that the rate of startup formation in this country relative to other countries is low, and that we need to deal with it. And so the thing that has to happen is this. If you think that the ecosystem will purely be sustained by a focus on established businesses and thinking that they will drive innovation of themselves without dealing with the fact that startups and the early stage innovation sector, the early shoots, the early green shoots of innovation in this country that are not being formed at a rate that is being done elsewhere, needs to happen. It needs to get the focus now. Otherwise, what happens is we just import ideas. That is all we do. We import ideas and other processes instead of doing it ourselves. And that is the reality, that if you do not provide that focus to early stage innovation and provide that and ensure that the capital and the talent is flowing into the sector, all that will happen is we'll see atrophy. We will not see. We'll be the first to come second. That's what will be happening. Instead of being able to rely on our own skills to see the growth of startups in this country, the growth of those ideas, the embrace then by SMEs and big businesses. But at this stage, there is absolutely no promise that this government will continue to champion it, certainly not under this minister, and there will be a continued inability to be arguing for the type of things that do need to change. The need to deal with the crippling shortages of skills that will help sustain those startups and get them ready for growth, the need for that investment that is required in there to sustain those ideas and see their expansion. I noticed that, for example, the minister's announced the expansion of the accelerator program, which we had argued. Well, it wasn't your idea, actually. It was someone else had to think it for you. It was an idea that was announced during the campaign as a result of the type of pressure that the federal opposition was putting to increase the amount of investment that you had dedicated. The reality is this: you only set aside $8 million for those accelerator support. It's now 25 or $23 million. It was expanded because when we were going through the nation in regional Australia and saying that we should be seeing start-up communities emerge beyond city boundaries and that we needed more support for that, working with the higher education sector, working with local chambers of commerce, working with others. Yes, I have actually. I've been to the University of Wollongong actually 2 years ago. So, and last year. Well, good for you. That's great. It's great to see you actually do something. And actually it'd be interesting to see if you can come up with an idea other than something that was championed by Christopher Pyne or in response to the pressure that we've been putting on. But we will not see you champion that. We'll wait and see, Minister. We will wait and see. But as I said, what has become obvious has been that we do need to have more of a focus in this space, that other countries have worked out that if they mobilise and put the commitment in early, they will see the response. They will see communities emerge where early-stage innovation is embraced and new firms are being created and jobs are being generated as a result of that, to deal with the type of job impact that happens through technological change and automation, and that people will see that it's not just in the heart of cities that this type of innovation occurs, but that it can happen in the regions, like in Bega, where I visited the member Ifeed Manara with you last year and earlier this year, and seeing the type of things that were happening in Bega Innovation Week, where a small startup community has emerged there, backed up by local people that are willing to invest in that innovation as well, and seeing that type of job creation emerge there. Why shouldn't it happen down there in Bega? Why shouldn't it happen out in Maitland, where I'd visited earlier, where startups there are not only looking to secure markets both in Australia but also in the US and Europe as well, backed by a proper investment in platform infrastructure, as rightly pointed out by my colleague and friend, in the NBN, which needs to happen as well, or in other parts of the country as well, where they believe that they can turn around economic fortune by an investment in people, skills and infrastructure to make that occur. It should not be something that is just restricted to the inner city. It should be something that sees knowledge jobs created out in our suburbs, out in our regions. And that needs a championing as well for the resources to go in there. And it's not going to happen if you purely think that the only way you're going to do it is drive innovation or the adoption of someone else's idea without having a solid early-stage innovation culture being generated in this country. And that is what is at risk right now. By your retreat from the start-up community in this country and your failure to talk up for them, and this whole diluting of the message that we're seeing right now is a terrible indictment and also a failure to support a start-up community that invested a lot of itself in supporting the Turnbull government and believed that you would be able to continue championing their cause, and they can't see that being delivered right now. And so the test will be whether or not we see a change. But based on the early indications, I don't think that is. I think this is a government that is now settled in a view that it is too tricky, too difficult, beyond their wit and capability to argue that this world that is going to change through automation and technological change, that we do need to be ready for it, that we can be ready for it, that we can maximise the benefit of this to the economy and communities across the country, and to also ensure that when others in the world want to work out how thriving startup communities can emerge, that they actually look to Australia for a change instead of us always having to look to another part of the world, to a Silicon Valley, to an Israel or somewhere else to learn lessons. We should be driving the lessons, not the